Hello Internet, welcome to my channel. I'm Chameleonx, and if you've been keeping tabs on the upcoming release of D&D 5.5, you'll know that WotC has been releasing previews of content from the new 2024 Player's Handbook. If you saw this video from XP to level 3 and also read the title of this video, you also know that some of them weren't great. The Ranger and the Monk have been widely regarded as the most poorly designed classes in 5th edition, the former having next to nothing in the way of combat-focused class features in the original 2014 release, and the latter being an actually genuinely good class once it hits higher levels, but an absolute slog to play at early levels. While the Ranger has subsequently been improved significantly with a bunch of optional feature swaps in Tasha's Cauldron, and a lot more of their combat power being piled into their subclasses, a lot of fans, myself included, were hoping to see the base class get another pass in the new edition to shore up the most obvious design flaws. Instead, what we got was, by and large, just taking the original Ranger and tossing it in the garbage, in favor of the Tasha's Cauldron Ranger just becoming the default option. Which is a strategy, I suppose. I just would have preferred more of a melding of old and new rather than just abandoning the entire concept of the 2014 Ranger and replacing it wholesale with a new version. Especially since this is basically the only class in the 2024 PHB to get this kind of a drastic redesign. Even the Monk was basically just a few tweaks added onto the same basic chassis from 2014, which admittedly caused its own problems, but that's for another video. So, in this video, I wanted to do some theory crafting, maybe partially for anyone who might be watching and interested in designing a DC-20-esque revision of the 5th edition rule set, but mostly just for the sake of throwing out some ideas that could be incorporated into people's games, if they're looking for homebrew fixes for the 2014 Ranger, and aren't interested in paying wizards for what is essentially just the Tasha's Ranger with a new coat of paint. So, let's get into it. Right off the bat is the core feature that starts the trend of the 2014 Ranger being weak unless they're in a very specific style of campaign. In the 2014 version, the signature ability of the Ranger was basically you're better at tracking and remembering stuff about a particular kind of creature, and you learn an extra language. That's it. You get to pick more favorite enemies as you level up, but ultimately if these 3 or 4 different types of creatures weren't appearing very often in your campaign, you essentially didn't have a class feature. Even if your DM did include a bunch of undead or orcs or elementals in their campaign, this feature isn't going to do a damn thing for you in combat. This is because, for some bizarre reason, WotC decided to totally split off the combat functionality that was a part of this feature in previous editions of D&D and make it a spell, which costs a spell slot, and concentration, and a bonus action. Now, this might have seemed fine when the game first launched, but with the benefit of hindsight, we can identify several problems with this approach. First of all, the Ranger is almost synonymous with two-weapon fighting in D&D. If you want to wield 2 weapons, you play a Ranger. But in 5e, you need a bonus action to engage in two-weapon fighting. You also need a bonus action to command an animal companion, which is another core aspect of the Ranger's identity, and several subclasses add more things that you can do as a bonus action. So how this works out at the table is that you mark an enemy and then you can't concentrate on any other spells, of which most of your best spells as a Ranger are going to require your concentration. When your quarry dies, you have to use another bonus action to switch to a different enemy, or otherwise you're concentrating on a nothing burger. Every time you switch your mark, you're also not going to be able to make your second attack, you can't command your beast, and you're also down a spell slot you could have used to do something more interesting than
this season. You.
Oh, and of course, Hunter's Mark has to be chosen, and is thus taking up one of your very limited selection of Ranger spells. If you don't choose Hunter's Mark, you're gimping your character, because the base class is balanced under the assumption that you're going to use Hunter's Mark. If you don't, you're going to lag behind. The solution in Tasha's Cauldron fixed a lot of these issues, but still retained the concentration mechanic, so you couldn't stack it on top of Hunter's Mark and or Hex. Paradoxically, the 2024 version of the Ranger ditches both of these options and it straight up gives you the Hunter's Mark spell and lets you cast it a few times without a slot, while not only ignoring the multiple issues with making that spell mandatory for the class to function, but doubling down on that decision by making a bunch of the new Ranger's class features explicitly only work if you have Hunter's Mark active. So basically, forget about ever concentrating on any other spells or using your bonus action for anything other than switching targets, I guess. So my solution to this problem is kill Hunter's Mark. Remove the spell from the game entirely and fold it into the base class as a unique feature. As for the specifics, I basically fused the Tasha's Cauldron version of Favored Foe with the Hunter's Mark spell. Now you don't need to concentrate on it, you don't need to spend your action swapping targets, and you aren't wasting spell slots and prepared spells that could be used on something that's actually interesting. You can fight with 2 weapons, command a beast, and cast any other spells you want, and your class still functions as intended. The other sore spot for the 2014 Ranger, this is the second feature that utterly depends on whether your DM puts the options you chose into the adventure. If not, you effectively don't have any first level features. Now, if you do choose the right terrain, this feature is amazing and acts exactly in line with what the flavor of a Ranger should be. So, of course, this is the feature WotC ditched entirely in favor of Deft Explorer, which, yes, is much more generally applicable to a much wider variety of situations, but doesn't exactly capture the same wilderness tracker concept as the 2014 feature. But since this is my ideal Ranger, why not add both? For my Ranger, I actually fixed the problem with Natural Explorer by simply giving you a few of the benefits no matter what terrain you're in, and then allowing you to attune to any type of terrain that you spend a day in. So instead of having to guess beforehand what types of terrain are going to be in the adventure your DM is cooking up, you learn how to survive by actually going out and experiencing the terrain and being immersed in it for an extended period. Then I also gave my Ranger Deft Explorer at level 6, because why not? The shining star of the 2024 martial classes, I have no problem with weapon mastery, so I added it to my Ranger at level 1. Fighting styles as a bonus feat are also not controversial, so no changes here. I like the overall direction of both of these changes. Moving on. Now, this change is probably going to turn some heads. I hate half-casters. Not that I mean I don't like Rangers, Paladins, and Artificers. I hate the way the concept of half-caster is implemented in 5th edition. Having to wait until level 17 to cast spells that the Wizard and Druid and Cleric have been rocking since level 9 is ridiculous to me. In practice, you might as well not even learn any spells beyond 3rd, since you're about as likely to get to level 13 or 17 in 5th edition D&D as Disney is to save the Star Wars franchise. So, in my redesign, I have a very different approach to martial casters. As you can see from this table, my version of the Ranger gains new spell levels at the same rate as all other casters, so they'll have their 5th level spell slots at 9th level with everyone else. What I did instead is have their progression grind to a near halt past this point. From 10th to 20th, the Ranger doesn't gain any new spell levels and only gains new spell slots every other level, eventually winding up with the same overall number of slots as the 2024 Ranger. So in practice, this isn't adding anything to the Ranger spellcasting that isn't already in the base class. The difference is that they'll actually get to use those higher level spells once or twice before the campaign is over. Now, obviously, if I was in charge of the game, I would implement this change on the Paladin and Artificer as well. This would be the default progression for all half-casters. This is a new feature that I came up with, meant to enhance the overall flavor of the Ranger class and also help a bit in the social interaction department. Part of this feature is a common house rule I know a lot of DMs already incorporate at their table, but I wanted to have it actually be a codified thing. The limit to creatures of intelligence 6 or lower is meant to reinforce the idea that this is supposed to work on animals, or things that are pretty much animals. I considered setting it to intelligence 3 since the vast majority of beasts have an int score of 3 or lower, but there were a few outliers with higher intelligence scores that it would make sense that a Ranger should be able to use this feature on.
Swiper, no swiping!
Oh, man!
If you want to lower the threshold, you can, of course, do that. At 3rd level, you get your subclass, just like with every other class in 5.5, nothing really new here. But this is a good spot to mention that included in the PDF linked in the description is a brand new subclass for the Ranger that I created specifically for this video, the Primordial Sentinel. This is an elemental-themed subclass that is compatible with both my new and improved Ranger as well as the base version in the 2014 and 2024 PHBs. Go ahead and check it out. Link down below. The only thing I added here is a caveat that if you took the Druidic Warrior fighting style and thus have cantrips, you can replace any of your extra attacks with a cantrip. This is inspired by other Gish-type builds that get a similar feature that allows them to mix martial and magical attacks. As mentioned earlier, I moved Deft Explorer to 6th level. Since Favorite Enemy and Natural Explorer no longer need to be improved, this would otherwise be a dead level, so this is a good place for it. I have slightly modified the feature here by merging the level 3 and 6 features that debuted in Tasha's.
So, in editing this video, I discovered that in my original script, I did not talk about the Primeval Awareness feature. It's another feature from the 2014 Player's Handbook Ranger that was basically useless as written. It's a 3rd level feature that requires you to expend a spell slot to get a benefit that is strictly worse than the Paladin's Divine Sense, which not only do they get at level 1, but does not require a spell slot. This feature was also totally jettisoned by WotC in both Tasha's Cauldron and the 2024 Player's Handbook, although the UA versions of the Ranger offered a replacement feature that basically amounted to just some extra bonus spells. But in my version of the feature, I went through a lot of different reworks to try to figure out how to actually make this feature work. So this is pretty much what I came up with. It uses a bonus action instead of an action, first of all. Doesn't require any spell slots to use the basic functionality. As a trade-off, you can only use it once per short or long rest, although you can expend a spell slot to get the usages back, and it's, actually useful. I added in the functionality of being able to sense the terrain around you as well as specific creatures, since that also feeds into the flavor of the Ranger as a wilderness explorer. It makes sense that a Ranger should be able to walk into a woodland and, instantly be able to tell that something's not right about it.
This was a feature that was totally dropped from the 2024 Ranger and didn't get an upgrade in Tasha's either. What I did here was just improve the feature by generalizing its effects a bit more so it's not so niche and streamlining the wording a bit in the process. You're now just immune to damage from non-magical plants, but not plant creatures, and you have advantage against any effect that would slow you down, not just plant-based spells. This way, the feature is far less situationally useful than the original. While technically a new feature, this is literally just expertise with a slight upgrade to Favorite Enemy tacked on. Since Hunter's Mark is no longer a spell in this version, I added in the upcast benefit as a baked-in feature. I upgraded the generally crap tireless feature to not waste an action and to actually give you a useful number of hit points that won't immediately drop to a single hit from a minion. That is all. This is a new feature modeled after the rogue's reliable talent, but specifically affecting the things Rangers should be extremely reliable at doing, tracking and spotting things. This is pretty much just the feature from Tasha's. I have no idea why the UA nerfed this feature to require spell slots, but the 5.5 PHB seemed to have removed that, and so I did as well. This was a feature added by the 2024 Ranger. I just added in the second upgrade to Hunter's Mark on the end. No issues here, moving on. This feature is notoriously garbage in pretty much every incarnation. In 5.5, it is somehow even worse than the dog shit version we had in the original PHB. Oh boy, my level 20 Capstone gives me an average of +2 damage on my attacks against one guy. How amazing! So yeah, I completely redesigned it. Now your attacks automatically deal maximum damage to any creature you have advantage against. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that Precise Hunter gives you advantage against your quarry. So those two features combine to mean you're effectively always hitting your quarry for max damage. I went through a few different iterations of this wording, but I settled on this one because it follows the general theme of the Ranger class of, this guy, fuck him in particular. I'm not going to stop until this douche is in the ground. But at the same time, it's not useless if you don't have a quarry marked, because there's so many other ways of getting advantage, especially by this point in the game. It might be a bit OP, but honestly, come on, it's level 20. Being able to deal max damage on every hit is no more broken than getting an automatic crit, turning every miss into a hit, or being able to literally tag in your god when you're on the ropes. So yeah, this was just a quick little video I wanted to put out to flex my design muscles. If you like my new Ranger, feel free to use it in your games and let me know how it plays at the table. The PDF with this entire class, as well as the Primordial Sentinel Conclave, will be linked in the description for free. If you would like more videos like this, let me know in the comments. I'm planning on doing a similar video for the Monk, but if you'd like me to cover other classes too, don't hesitate to ask. Until then, I've been Chameleon X, reminding you to make sure the helmet is actually a prop before you kick it.